If you enjoy listening to The Edge, support them by subscribing to The Edge on iTunes, Stitcher, and you can listen through the iHeartRadio app. Get busy listening.
This is The Edge.
The advantage it means.
They let guys spit on me for no reason.
That's horrible.
Is there some comfort in uncertainty, do you think?
You're a degenerate.
Because Australian Shepherds need action.
Wow. Yeah.
This is The Edge.
That's a self-loathing term that I use.
Oh, got it.
Hi, this is Mark Thompson. Welcome to our show. Great guest today. This is a name, David Mirkin, that you've seen on so many different entertainment projects that it might just be one of those things that just kind of imprints. He's been a writer, producer, executive producer on shows from Three's Company to Newhart to It's Gary Shandling Show, The Tracy Ullman Show, Larry Sanders Show, that Chris Elliott show called Get a Life. He was a creator and executive producer on that, and so on. It goes on. And The Simpsons, of course. So you got this guy who is so very prolific, and he's done films, Romy and Michelle's High School Reunion and Heartbreakers, to just name a couple. But he's really someone who has, by virtue of, I think, his interests and his life course, connected with many different people like Paul McCartney and James Taylor, and Carrie Fisher was a very good friend of his, and he talks a bit about that. So David Mirkin will be our guest. J.Elvis Weinstein, Josh will join us, and Laura House is back. I love my Laura House. Funny, great energy, and both of them will sit in for our conversation with Dave Mirkin. On our last episode, I mentioned to you a story that had just broken, and I thought it was kind of this quirky story that I would just pass along. And it was that story about that cadet program that the LAPD runs. They run it to sort of do community outreach with teens that might have an interest in law enforcement. Well, you'll remember last time I told you that the LAPD realized that 2 of their patrol cruisers had been stolen, and stolen by cadets. So they take the cops on a high-speed chase. There are crashes all over. Both cruisers crash. Another cop crashes. But here's what's happened since then. They arrested that 15-year-old girl who stole that cruiser. Turns out she was having a relationship with one of the cops who was in the department's cadet program. So he's there like supervising it. Meanwhile, he's having a sexual relationship with this 15-year-old. This is a guy who, when he was arrested here in L.A., the chief of police in L.A. personally arrested him with the chief's own handcuffs. So this is clearly a bruise to the department. And by the way, now they're investigating this guy. They go to his house. Turns out he has a bunch of assault rifles there. He's got grenades, grenade launchers. That's your update on what's happening with that story that I mentioned to you last week. I'll also just mention that there are records being broken all over the Southwest and the Western United States for heat. Temperatures are hitting 122 degrees in Palm Springs. Needles, California, which is in the desert, hit 125. Phoenix, and all of you who are anywhere in the West, Las Vegas, the mercury is easily hitting 113, 115 degrees. Fires are raging out of control. I saw there's a fire in the West that's over 60 square miles. It's going to be a long, hot summer. 7 people have already lost their lives to the heat, and power grids are down. The planet is not happy right now. Well, thanks for being here. Thanks for all the ways that you support this show. Any monies that you send to this show through the PayPal link, which is on our website at edge-show.com. Any monies which come to the Amazon link, if you do any Amazon shopping and you shop through our link, it all stays with our little podcast. Finally, thank you for sharing the show. We're trying to grow the audience. That's the way we grow it. And thanks for any positive reviews you leave on iTunes. Any 5-star positive things you have to say. Very much appreciated to help keep us alive in the iTunes universe. Thanks for all the ways you show us love.
This is The Edge.
By the way, well, just in the interest of introducing everyone, Laura has written for Chuck Lorre and has done a bunch of writing and performing, very funny, and you should know that. And J.Elvis is a documentary filmmaker and comedy writer, Freaks and Geeks, and original member of Mystery Science Theater 3000. So that's what everybody... And we're going to find out about Dave now.
Credits. We all have credits.
Good
No,
credits.
I knew that.
Excellent credits.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Just so
I didn't want to say anything. but I'm freaking out a little bit.
But it's really cool to have Dave Mirkin with us. Dave is a real, I don't know how to refer to you, like you're a multi-threat. You've done a lot. You've done a ton.
I've done a ton, and I am threatening, yes.
Like a constant threat.
He's threatened me multiple ways just since we got here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm threatening everyone in the room.
Yeah.
And it's mostly physical threat.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what I specialize in.
Well, I want to welcome you to The Edge, and this is not the first show called The Edge that you've been associated with, Dave Mirkin.
That's right. I created a sketch show called The Edge.
And it was pretty successful.
It was Jennifer Aniston, Wayne Knight, and Julie Brown. And
Whatever happened to...
well, one of the reasons I'm here... One of the reasons I'm here is to sue you for the.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect in.
I was hanging out with my good friend at the time, and still good friend, Paul Feig, who was on that show, and it was a very big event in his life at the time. So thank you on his behalf 25 years ago.
I remember it.
I love Paul. I loved him back then, and he was such a fantastic performer and sweet guy. Since then, he's become a horrible,
awful.
You never hear anything nice about him.
Now,
No,
Paul,
he remains a lovely man.
And just for reference's sake, Paul Feig went on to do what, J.Elvis?
Oh, well, he created Freaks and Geeks, and he's since directed Bridesmaids, Ghostbusters, The Heat,
Spy.
Yeah, so some good stuff.
He's done well for his suited self.
He's struggling.
He's fancy.
Yeah.
But you did do this show, The Edge. It was a sketch show. Look, it's not what you're known for, but I think it's kind of funny that you're here and that you did do a show called The Edge.
I think it's nice of him.
It's really nice of me, and it continues to have kind of a rabid following of idiots, and so so that's kind of like a nice feather in my cap.
Now, what do they most know you for? The Simpsons? Is that just because your name shows up consistently there, or where?
You know, it's weird. I have in everything I've done, I have left pools of like rabid, troubled people in each thing. So, Get a Life with Chris Elliott,
Absolutely.
Still has a very strong following. So people will know me from that, and a lot of those people came along to The Edge and The Simpsons. And then in feature world, it's more female-driven comedy. I directed Romeo and Michelle's High School Reunion and Heartbreakers with Sigourney Weaver, and so I'll find mothers and daughters that are just crazy Romeo and Michelle fans and have seen it 20 times and have no idea about The Simpsons and then vice versa.
I mean, you were just going through them so quickly. I was just trying to think about the Chris Elliott show, Get a Life. What a premise. And I guess, and you guys had to swim upstream against a lot of network blowback at the time. I mean, just because it was a dark premise.
Yes, it was. I basically tricked the network into picking that show up. Chris and I had talked about working together on. I was doing an American version of the English show The Young Ones. I was trying to bring that to America, and I had Nigel Planer from the original Young Ones, also a great cult following show. And I wanted Chris to play a part, which I eventually did with Jackie Earle Haley, brilliant Jackie Earle Haley.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And Chris really wanted to kind of do a show that was more all about him instead of sort of an ensemble of three people. And so we kept talking because we had such a great time just meeting each other. And the network actually tried to keep us from meeting because they were interested in Chris for a very typical, horrible sitcom where they would cut his balls off. And all kind of said that. Yeah. And just turn him into one of these TV things. And I told him, I said, you're crazy to do this other show. You know, it's not who you are. You have to keep up the persona from a Letterman and do something really edgy. And he said, well, let's do that together. And Get a Life grew out of that. And when Chris, I was actually busy still doing the Young Ones pilot, and Chris ran to the network, told them this premise of the 30-year-old paperboy living at home, and they hated it, even to a point that his own agent turned against him in the room and looked at him and said, that's not very good. And so they could tell that it was a nasty kind of story of a loser. And so Chris called me and said, we're never going to get this done. I said, leave it to me. And I went in with Peter Chern. And I said, Peter, he's not a loser. He's an alternative lifestyle. He knows how to be a kid even when he's an adult. He's having all this fun. Great. And all these losers aren't, you know. And got them excited about that and sort of delivered a pilot that had some of that feeling in it. And then by the second show, I said, and by the way, he's psychotic and he's losing his grip of reality. And, you know, they did not have a lot of enthusiasm for that.
It's tough not to warm to the premise of here's this guy who's 30 years old who lives at home and he's a lovable loser. When you throw lovable into pretty much anything, I guess it makes it more palatable. But didn't he like die in the show?
Yes, I was very interested in flexible reality is what I call it. And that's what The Young Ones was. It's like you can have death, you can have chairs talk and the ceilings fall down. It's very Dali-esque comedy, very Duchamp-esque comedy. I just love that.
Imagine that the network was great with that.
They do not like their main characters to be killed every week. They find that makes it hard to bring an audience back the next week if the guy seems to have died. And they find it to be kind of a negative outlook.
That's so close-minded.
It was very, very close-minded. Yeah, so I would start to wipe him out at the end of most episodes in different creative ways, and it was great fun. It was great fun to do it, but yes, it was.
And before South Park did it,
I was just about to say
long before. It was Kenny is a ripoff, and that's in addition to the Edge lawsuit we have here today. It's time to announce the South Park lawsuit.
Yeah, it was pre-South Park.
That's right.
I also feel like quick note to Louis C.K. You're welcome.
Well, that show was what we like to say is that Get a Life was way ahead of its time.
Way ahead, yeah.
Meaning at the time it was a failure. So that's the way you sort of.
But you also worked on Shandling's first show, correct?
I worked on both It's Gary Shandling and Larry Sanders. And It's Gary Shandling also had flexible reality.
It's the best.
And the meta sitcom though. They were very early takes on being, on starting to break the form a bit.
It was really true. Now, really, what Gary was doing goes all the way back to George Burns. And he used to talk to the camera. Like someone would leave the room. What Gracie doesn't know is that her car is going to blow up when she tries to start it, and she's going to be horribly burned. That was an episode.
That's a rough.
Did you ever
episode.
see that one?
Yeah,
it's just rarely.
I was very young at the time, and
it still scarred you.
It was very upsetting, but I was also like, I guess you have to learn sometime.
And I always thought Burns referred to his name, but it turns out
it was actually
but until you saw her, and then it was like, he means third degree.
I thought it was great that they maintained the Burns through the rest of the seasons, and it was
and she
great.
kept her cool. She kept that innocent.
She was still funny.
Yeah,
George, why am I in constant pain? Remember, she would say that. That
was
like
just
became a catchphrase.
We've been over this before.
Yeah.
The idea of doing what they did on the original It's Gary Shandling show, which you guys did, I should say, but the idea that you did see the sitcom being done, you saw cameras dollying, you saw all this sort of thing, that was even beyond what they did on George Burns' show.
It was the next step. Gary was so brilliant, and it was so much fun to work with him on both his series, and he became a dear friend of mine. We had a very similar background. We were both electronics engineers and ham radio operators, and so we bonded over this horrible geekdom, and it was great to work with him on that. But yeah, the thing that's very different about this Gary Shandling show is it was a celebration of all the sitcoms that came before and that form and pointing it out. Whereas Get a Life, the entire point of it was to point out that all these sitcoms were horrible pieces of shit, and they were very,
I see.
And they were too. And that's not to say that great sitcoms weren't great sitcoms, but that there were so many of these incredibly cynical "I love you" sitcoms where they hug every 4 minutes and they just always the problems are completely solved in 22 minutes. That used to infuriate me.
Sure, that's the mainstream sitcom form.
The mainstream. So I was tired of that. I'd run the Newhart show, which I just loved Bob Newhart, and he was a hero. I'm the first comedian I ever heard, along with Bob and Ray, and those things were great, and they were so well done. But then there were these sitcoms that were, just pale imitations of that were just this happy horse shit all the time. And Get a Life was designed to point out that business model was stupid and sucked and you shouldn't watch it, which also thrilled the network.
Yeah, that's a tough pitch.
Yeah.
What were the events that led to you? Because I have to think for you that working with Bob Newhart and running that Newhart show had to be just like you felt like you could plant the flag, I would think. What were the events that led up to that? Like, how did that happen?
It was. I've been so lucky in my career, and when I say lucky, I mean I've slept with the right people, and that's what I use. I use my sexuality to just get through whatever I need, and that's the way I move up.
Sure.
No, I had. I
hope everyone's taking note.
It's a shame you can't see me. You would understand what I'm talking about.
It comes through.
It comes through. Everyone in this room can feel the sexual tension. I was trying to break in as a writer, and I was a stand-up making a living doing that while trying to break in. I wanted to be a writer mostly. And MTM was the place to be because it was pretty much created by one of the smartest men in the world in show business, Grant Tinker, the amazing Mary Tyler Moore, who I worshipped, and in that show I worshipped, and Jim Brooks, and Alan Burns, the writers that really did that. They're the ones that taught me to write when I'm growing up, and that entire company had freedom like no other place in television.
So you're saying you're watching Mary Tyler Moore as a young person.
That's right.
And that's kind of informing.
That and the Dick Van Dyke Show is how I learned how to write. And then Monty Python coming in.
And that's the alternate reality stuff.
And that's the alternate reality stuff. And so that kind of all melded together. Really strong character comedy mixed with surreal Dadaism at the same time. That's always what I was interested in. But still, I wanted to work in MTM. And the only job I could get to begin with, because I had access through a very, very wonderful writer in his own right, George Tricker, through a long story, which I won't get into, the only people that I ever knew and found my way into was Three's Company, which was a very hard job to get.
I'll bet.
But I really studied it because and I got to write a script for them. And was a really interesting, because that's how I learned structure. Because in Three's Company, the characters are too stupid to say anything clever. And all the jokes have to come through just misunderstanding and French farce. And it's very hard to structure those things so that they work kind of effortlessly, if you consider Three's Company effortless. And and so I took it. Was not a job I was that interested in, but I took it, I got it, and I wrote the script, and I was instantly on staff, even though I didn't want to be on staff. And it's true. And my agent said, because he packaged the show, he said, "You're on staff." And I said, "Why? They're interested in me at Cheers." Because I was writing spec taxis at that point.
And that's just the opposite, right? Jokes.
Completely the opposite. Right. Character comedy, and
Sam was often pretty clumsy.
He was a little bit clumsy.
Sam was often
every
clumsy.
once in a while. Yeah.
Sometimes it was like, "What are Cliff and Carla doing in the pool room?" And then she was like, "Oh, get your balls out of here." And they were all like, "What? I think they're doing it."
That's right.
I remember Cheers.
You remember Cheers.
Yeah,
I remember.
You got it, Laura.
You got it, Laura.
Cheers was the lowest rated show, second lowest rated show on TV at that time, just in front of Hill Street Blues.
Is that right? It came on. It was a slow burn.
It was just like Hill Street Blues. Grant Tinker put this must-see night of TV, Thursday night, the best night of television, on television, and nobody watched it for about 2 years. But he just sat with it and said it will take people time to discover these great shows, and they did, and they became unstoppable.
Just like always happens now.
Exactly. Yeah. It's almost as good as canceling something after 3 episodes. And, so that was Grant's theory. That was his whole thing, and it really worked. So Cheers was interested in me, but my agent was like, that's the 92 rated show, and Three's Companies are often number 1. It's often number 4. And so he said, go on that, and then if Cheers is interested in you, you can go over and do the episode there. That was not a truthful thing to say.
By the way, were you there during Fell or Knots?
Knots, which was also an amazing experience.
Now, tell everybody, because some people are. So you're talking about
Norman Fell,
who
played Mr. Roper.
Who plays the neighbor. Or is he the neighbor, or what is he?
He's the landlord.
The landlord, Mr. Roper. And then Don Knotts replaced him? Is that what
Correct, as the swinging Mr. Furley.
Because they spun off the Ropers.
Oh, they spun it off.
With
Yes.
Jeffrey Tambor as their neighbor.
Jeffrey Tambor.
Wow.
That was our introduction to Jeffrey Tambor.
Very good
Not in
knowledge.
drag. That's right. That was when he was still dressing like a man.
And at that time you were
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
I'm trying to follow Mirkin in his career. All right, so Three's Company is where you are during the Don Knotts now stage.
That's right.
Okay.
Which was amazing to work with Don. They were all amazing. John Ritter, Don Knotts. They're so lovely. It was such a lucky first job to have such nice people around and non-intimidating and let you grow.
And they weren't hard on you, the new writer?
No, they weren't. I mean,
Wow.
Sexually a little bit. But I learned quick. I learned very quick. And as long as I only cried like the first few. No, it was fine. They were the sweetest people.
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Suzanne Summers.
Was not there
She
at
was
that
gone.
point.
First
She was
season
gone.
only.
Okay. Oh, is that right?
First season asked
Laura
for more
House.
money.
Good knowledge.
Then
Who,
they
Jenna
were like,
Lee
no.
Harrison. Welcome, Jenna Lee Harrison.
And there was somebody before that.
They just kept plugging blondes
somebody
in there.
after that.
Yeah, there was the one who played the nurse.
The one who played the nurse. That's who I was there with.
Wow.
Very lovely.
Okay.
Very lovely.
So go ahead.
But anyway, yeah, they were all great.
Oh, you're bored now with the story?
No, I wanted to see. And
Enough
I'm
with the
bored.
fake Chrissies. All right, move it along.
And it was a great experience. And I asked my agent. I then called my friends at Cheers and said, "So what's?" Because I knew they got picked up for a back nine. They were actually waiting to see if they would get their back nine from the initial order. And my friends there said, "Oh, your agent nixed that for you. He said you weren't available."
How are things at the Regal Beagle?
Yeah, exactly.
Wait a minute. So your agent actually turned the gig down?
He kind of, subtly just got me on the show that he thought was the best, and we parted ways kind of over that.
I would think.
Yeah. And I found a new agent, and
who hated to get a life.
He was
a good run on agent.
This agent has been with me forever. So
awesome.
Right this minute, and was a huge supporter of Get a Life. And,
That's great.
He was good. And this other agent was very nice too. He just thought that it didn't make any sense to go on the lowest rated show versus the top. They could not see a quality difference. And believe me, I used to kind of hide the Three's Company credit.
All right.
I'll have people come up to me, "That's the greatest show. I grew up on that." And they have no idea that it's not particularly, the writing isn't exactly celebrated. Let's say that, But it's really incredibly well crafted, and those actors were brilliant. And it was a great, like I said, training ground to learn structure to that level, which allowed me to run shows very, very earlier than most people because I had that background.
I'm thinking of other shows that sort of have that farcical thing. But then, and I was thinking of Married with Children, but then I was thinking, well, Married with Children, though, was probably jokier than
it was.
Well, and it was much more self-aware too. It was much more. It was also sort of starting to poke at the meta sitcom thing because it was this despicable family that we had never seen before.
Despicable, terrible marriage, everything the opposite of what
Kelly's
you saw. And
just a slut.
Those jokes were really excellent on Married with Children. They were really, really well-crafted jokes, and they did say funny things. Whereas Three's Company, again, they had some cute jokes and everything, but most of the laughs were based on people overhearing and thinking sexual innuendo when there was no sex. If you notice, on Three's Company, it's all about sex, but nobody gets any, which was the American dream, which is a suppressed sexual country. And that's what it was all about.
The greatest puritanical sitcom of all time.
It was. It should have been called Blue Balls. I mean, that's all it was the entire time. No one ever got laid on that show. They just talked about it.
So your agent turns down Cheers. You get a new agent.
Yes, and there happened to be this was a time when comedy was dead. This is before Cosby. I have no idea what's happened to him. But when his show came out, it became this huge thing that revived comedy. And the idiocy of the business was that comedy is dead. People no longer want to laugh. And that does happen periodically. We go through 10 years where I do not want to laugh. Yeah, it's not bullshit. But anyway, that was the belief. So they were developing very few comedies in the air. The big successful comedy on CBS was the Newhart show. Luckily, there was one opening. They hired 7 writers to do scripts. I was one of the 7. I was very lucky. I wrote the script. They loved it. They put me on staff. A great guy named Dan Wilcox hired me and put me on staff. Dan left within about a year after that. And just out of, again, I think the fact that I was my sexual attraction to people, and the fact
it's in full display at that point.
Full display always.
Yeah.
And I became the showrunner of that show. They made me an executive producer at a young age. I figured I would get fired very quickly, but it actually went really well. I got my first Emmy nomination for writing, and it was just a dream. And it was my ultimate dream because that's what I grew up. The Mary Tyler Moore Show. I was doing a version of that at MTM. Complete freedom from the network, complete support from the network. They were very, very sweet. I had the same people from the network who were the liaisons for the Mary Tyler Moore Show.
Wow.
Probably in their 60s at that point. And they were lovely. They would just come up to me after a run through and they would look at me, and the run through, good, bad. And they'd say, "You know what to do." And they would leave. And that would be, that's what you hire someone that knows how to do it to do, And so.
Laura, is that the way it was with Chuck Lorre when you were working on that?
Oh, they don't speak to him. They wouldn't even dare say that. People they take a look, he glances, they just skulk away. Okay.
Yeah, so he owns
we'll be out of your
network.
way soon, sir.
Yeah,
that's what the executives say to Chuck.
Yeah.
They recognize success, and it's a clever thing to do.
He reminds them, I think.
I saw an interview with Gleason years and years ago talking about doing a TV show, and he's like, "The thing you need to do a TV show is clout. Otherwise, they will eat you alive." But
it's
don't,
true.
And I that just stuck with me forever, and it's so true. And I've watched it so many times when new showrunners getting their asses chewed, and guys who have a hit show on going, "Okay, we're good."
You have to fight for that freedom, and I've been lucky enough to be able to take the freedom I have from MTM and bring it to the other shows that I've done. So that's been my blessing and luck to do that.
When you joined the Newhart show, it had already then been on the air as Newhart. Right?
It had been on the air. He was unhappy with the person who had created the show and was running it. And he basically got rid of virtually that entire group. And we were the new group that came on.
I see.
And he was much happier with that. And, you know, he went from being unhappy to real. We had such a great relationship. He was such a lovely guy. He is such a lovely guy. So it was just, I said it was this amazing honeymoon. It was my absolute dream. And I did it for 4 years. And then I hit a wall where I realized I couldn't just do a basic sitcom of people sitting on a couch or something and a 3-camera thing stuck in the room and all that. It was too limiting. It was really fun to explore it for about the 4 or 5 years that I did. But then I wanted to do this weird crap. I was so much more inspired, and I could have made, I got offered so much to just stay in that lane.
Sure.
But I couldn't do it. And that was one of the reasons Gary and I became friends, because I loved what he was doing on his show, and that was interesting. And at the same time, I was doing his Gary Shandling shows when I did the pilot for The Young Ones, and then started to develop that show with Chris Elliott.
Where did you meet Gary Shandling?
I met Gary Shandling because he was a fan of my work on Newhart.
I see.
And I had seen him in the clubs, and we knew each other a little bit from the clubs, but we really sat down and talked and got to meet each other when I had heard he was a fan. And I said, well, I'd love to help out on your show. And he was super interested in that. And then we became, he was one of my really closest friends for a long time.
We did a whole show when he died, and neither one of us really had.
He what? No. I love the silence. I was
thinking, wait a minute.
Nobody said anything about
This is how I find out.
Yeah.
This is how we hear.
But what was notable about our show is that neither one of us knew Gary Shandling.
Well, I had worked with him.
Oh, you had worked
I had
with him.
written jokes for award show with him before.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
I've been in a couple rooms with him, but I didn't know him really. I wasn't part of his basketball game or anything like that.
Yeah, we would have the basketball game, and then after the basketball game, Gary and I, many Sundays, would then go out and look at open houses.
That's great fun, though, isn't it?
It was great fun. We were like a married couple, and and that was sort of our thing. We'd also try in those days to pick up women with no success whatsoever.
Isn't that wild that two guys with so much money and so
he
much
was
show
famous.
business.
that was,
I find that impossible to believe.
It was unbelievable. It always wound up with us having to pay like several $1,000s for a hooker. At the end of the night.
Just one?
I probably shouldn't be saying this.
Wow.
Well, sometimes it would depend on how much cash.
We'll just both put in a credit card, split down the middle?
It was always a negotiation. The negotiation was much longer than the sex.
Who gets the extra penny?
So you became good friends. By the way, I just want to go back. That's a pretty remarkable thing you did. You pushed away from, imagine this, everybody. You're at your dream job. You've dreamt of working with this person, Bob Newhart. You're doing it. And it's an incredibly successful show. And then after 4 years, you go, you know what? I want to do my alternate reality thing, though, also. And this is, look, it's tough to push away from big money and big success like that.
It sounds really brave, and it's actually nothing
You
I
didn't
had.
think you were pushing away from big money at the time, did you?
I did. I knew I was going to make less money, but I didn't have any choice. It's like I literally, when I'm not doing something that I love, I kind of get ill and anxious.
I'm the same way. I've left lots of jobs that were still in full swing for that very reason. Yeah.
Josh does kind of follow his thing.
Good for you. Yeah. Good for you. I left Three's Company. My first job that took me forever to get, and I had to turn them down, and it was at the time a huge amount of money. It's still it was about $250,000 that I was turning down. And in my head, I was this big, I was being very brave, and I was following, because I had no choice. I had to do it. But still, I was thinking, this is going to be a brave thing, and I got on the phone to do it. And my hand was shaking I couldn't even barely hold the phone to my ear. So it's far from heroic, but I was forced to do it in each case, and it's a health decision, really, is what it is.
Yeah, I agree.
I've left jobs after they say, "Hey, we're not going to pick up your contract."
I've heard about that.
And then I go, well, then you know what? I'm not going to work here anymore.
Let's see if you make it through the podcast. It's going to be interesting. Yeah.
It will be interesting to see.
But,
we'll see.
But it's a course, nonetheless.
But that's my standard. That's where I draw the line.
Right.
Well, if you're not going to pick up my contract, then I'm not going to keep coming here.
I remember it's the same thing with women. I broke up with my girlfriend the instant she moved in with someone else.
Wow.
I mean, I just,
Good for you.
I just, there's certain things that I
There's
need in a relationship.
lines in the sand.
Yeah.
Lines in the
Yeah.
sand. That's right.
Certain
Self-esteem.
things I need in a relationship.
Yeah.
Just
Like a person.
That's right.
Like that person.
So you're hanging out with Gary Shandling. The It's Gary Shandling show then was what you segued to out of the...
As a part-time, part of the secret of my long friendship with Gary was to never work full-time on a Gary Shandling show. And I made so many friends on that show that I later worked with on The Simpsons and other things. And I would come in, what you are, and it's, I created this on The Simpsons as well for other people and then myself later. You become the guy who comes in 1 or 2 days a week, and so you have all this energy and you're happy, and you walk into a room with all your friends and like, how are you doing? And you're like, oh, Jesus Christ. Fucking, yeah.
If we order from Chin Chin one more time.
Exactly. And the amount of rewriting that goes on that people may or may not agree is necessary or not necessary. So there are the various bitching that rich writers do. And no business doing that. I always show pictures of Syria whenever they start to complain. Just have them right there. So we have nothing to ever complain about.
There's no chin chin delivered in this area.
That's right. That's right. And so I was able to keep a very happy, fun thing where you're just going in and you're helping your friend and you're having a good time. You're doing a lot of laughs and you're down and you're writing on the floor, or you're doing, and then, Larry Sanders, I wrote on the first, and he asked me to create Larry Sanders with him.
Right.
Wow.
And luckily I was busy. I was in between the Get a Life and The Edge.
You're saying that way, if you say luckily, because like you didn't want to get into the driver's seat on that show, or even.
No, it would have been so hard on the friendship to do that because of Gary's methods and the way he works and his brilliance, but it's just difficult. And I actually, good or bad, I recommended the guy who created it with him, Dennis Klein, who I'd known from his work on Buffalo Bill. And Dennis created the show with him, with Gary. And I think before I went to the first read and shooting to rewrite, I think Dennis was already gone.
I was going to say, well, you went for a long, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And that would have been me. That would have been me, despite our friendship. Just the nature of the way things go.
The birthing process would have been too tough on your relationship.
It's tough, and an everyday thing. It's just it would have been difficult. So I was incredibly blessed to be able to have this relationship with Gary that was almost always just fun and just laughs and just helping any way I could.
Some people are willing to, and what I've heard of him is some people are willing to do rewrites to quell their anxiety just to make sure that there isn't another joke there.
Well, what Gary liked to do, and this was just, and you have to, whenever, and I've directed everybody because of The Simpsons and everything. I love to find out what it is they need. I don't walk in with an ego. It's got to be like for me. I go, what is going to make them the most comfortable to give me the best performance and the best thing? And with Gary, he just loved to come up with things at the moment. But to get there and for the things for him to come up at the moment, to be organic and to be really true to the moment in the scene, he would have to work it to death in rewrites.
Right.
So he does all that work, and then on the floor, he might not say. He might come up with something completely new, but it's still true and real to the story. That's great for him. It's great when I'm directing him. As a writer who might have been there 16, 17 hours a night, that can be very, it could take a lot out of you.
Demoralizing.
It can be a bit demoralizing. But that's the gig if you're in that particular gig.
And there's plenty of shows where you're there for those same hours and it's shit at the end.
Well, there's a whole bunch. There's so many people that don't know how to run shows, and they make this mistake where they work themselves into the ground and they keep rewriting when they shouldn't and all that kind of stuff. I learned from such great people to begin with because I got to hang out around MASH in the beginning, and I would watch the way successful shows were done and also figured out my own stuff. Also from doing stand-up and also from doing the shows in front of a live audience about what you really need to do to fix it. So many people throw everything out. That's a huge mistake. Unless you're completely incompetent, why are you throwing everything out? The idea is to hear what worked, or if something got a huge laugh in the room when you're writing it and it's not working on stage or it needs a little bit, figure out what it is that you're missing and put it in. Don't throw the whole thing out. Work on the stuff that clearly sucks. Only fix that. Keep everything else, and get your story right in the beginning. Don't throw your story out. Sometimes I'd spend anywhere from 3 to 7 days just on the story to make sure the story works. And I virtually have never thrown out a story because we got it right in the beginning. And it was just a matter of making it work, knowing what, keeping with our vision from the beginning. And there's so many people, let's do a whole new story. And you're doing a story in 2 days, you're doing it in 1 day. It's most likely going to suck.
Right. Because on unhealthy shows, people start making fear-based decisions about everything.
You can never be afraid.
That's not where comedy lives.
There's nothing to be afraid of. Again, show pictures of Syria. There is fear in Syria. There's no fear in writing a comedy show. You have to just go with your gut and have it be fun and have it be a positive thing. And that's the way Gary was, and his thing is that he wasn't coming from a fear base. He was trying to get it better and better and then be really alive at the moment when he would perform it too. And, it's just a matter of serving it. Now, on the Newhart show, they never changed a word that we wrote.
Oh, wow.
Because MTM was a writer's company. And so it was like, the Bible coming in, whatever. If they had questions, they want to do different things, we'd always try different things. But in general, they were so respectful of the word, and Bob knew that, and he loved that, and he believed in that. Gary's a different guy. You work with something else. Chris Elliott also loved to have the script and do what we wrote. And he committed like nobody else. He's one of my favorite performers to this day because his commitment is so extreme. But he's not the kind of guy that was just like coming up with stuff on the set. He would just be a great actor with what he was given. But Gary's a different kettle of fish. Someone else is you figure out what they need and you give it to them.
And every show has its own culture, and that's set both by the showrunner and by the relationship that the showrunner has with the star of the show.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. There's some people that just, like Albert Brooks, who, I've had on The Simpsons many times, you get a script is only a suggestion, even on The Simpsons, and he's going to come up with things that you would never in a million years come up with.
I'm a monster Albert Brooks fan, and somebody sent me some outtakes from The Simpsons. It's not long. It's like 2 minutes of him riffing on the episode where it's Marge falls in love with the French, right? And you feel it, like a guy who's got that just genius.
He's a genius. He's an absolute genius. And the way it would work is, I'd direct him, and then he would, start with the script, and then he'd go off on that, and we'd do that take, and then I'd say, that was so funny, and he'd go, what did I say? He couldn't even remember what it was that he did because he was so in the moment. And then I would wind up with about 4 hours of stuff, and then you would edit the what he said. That's the great thing about animation. You could edit sentence for sentence and create whatever you wanted out of what he gave you.
Sure.
And it's just a fantastic. It's a very, very time consuming experience, but it's a very fantastic experience at the same time.
Right, because you're using Albert Brooks.
You're using but it was totally worth it when we would choose to use him. It never disappointed.
Those episodes are just gold,
And that would be a huge mistake of him to come in and say, stick to the script, just say what that's not, then you don't want him.
Right.
And it was a mistake to do that with Gary too. There was an issue of the way Mike Nichols and Gary worked together. They weren't exactly in sync on that, and that was difficult. It was Mike wanted it the way he wanted it because he could be a director like that. This got to be my way. Right. And Gary was coming from being a showrunner, getting his way, and that was a little bit of a headbutting there, and it wasn't the best combination. I would, if the guy is starring in the movie, I'm not going to try and he wrote it, I'm not going to try and get him to do it a different way.
Sure.
Yeah.
So let me just try to follow a bouncing ball here. So you go from the It's Gary Shandling show.
It's Gary Shandling show. At the same time, I'm doing the pilot for The Young Ones and the pilot for Get a Life.
Right.
And then right when we started to do Larry Sanders, I was doing The Edge.
That's right. So that was your real full-time commitment, and then you're getting into Larry Sanders.
I could take like a day off a week and go and then hang out with Gary. Yeah.
Do you when you were just going and hanging out? Were you like doing punch up or just suggesting things, or was it more?
It would be in the rewrite room. Yeah. So it was all those things. It was punch up. It was helping with story. When you show up that day, you're looking at it's usually the day after the read or the day before you shoot, and everyone's looking to get it to be the best it can be, and they have the various problems. So you're there to help. You're there, okay, what do we need? And here's what I felt when I heard the read, and maybe we could do this. And you got to keep it in your head. It's the same thing. What can we do in a day? Don't make idiot suggestions that are going to take longer. What are we doing to improve everything that's here in this voice, in this story, making that happen?
And that was at the beginning, before it was a sensation, the Larry Sanders show.
It was the very first show, and there was a lot of hand-wringing about it because, the tone had to be right. And there was a lot, at that point is when the tone is kind of finding itself and all the actors are finding themselves that they, interact with each other properly. We had, Janine Garofalo there, which was one of the reasons I put her in Romeo and Michelle. And, just all these people meshing and coming up with this tone that Gary always had in his head when he was trying to create the show. And he said, come and let's talk about this. And we had many meetings about it. He had that entire show in his head. He had the tone in his head, but he had to make that happen with everyone else and get everybody on the page. And that was, there's hand-wringing and worry about that.
You're making me remember, this is sort of like maybe similar to the Chris Elliott show. Larry Sanders wasn't all this great guy, right? He was also
he was an
not
asshole.
At all.
And that was kind of cool. I love those shows. You mentioned Buffalo Bill. Buffalo Bill was like that. I love those shows where the lead guy isn't exactly this
If you're doing a showbiz show and self-absorption isn't a character, then you're not doing it right.
That's right. Maggie Gallagher is funny. She was in both those shows. She was the girlfriend of Buffalo Bill, and then she was the wife of Larry Sanders in the first season, and did a fantastic job. She really did.
I also like I'm sorry, and now it's just like free associating Larry Sanders, the episode where his business manager lost all his money. I thought that was just a great premise, and it's kind of it's a real thing that happens.
Oh, it's a real thing.
Yeah.
That's another reason we're here today.
That's why we need that good edge money.
Yeah.
Here for the podcast dollars.
But you did go on, and then you directed features as well. I mean,
that's right. Well, then, from the Edge, I took over The Simpsons and did that for about 3 years. Worked on that for 3 years, and then created a thing where because when I took over The Simpsons, I had to create an entirely new writing staff because everyone had just crunched out and were too crispy and couldn't stay. So I had to find all these new people, put the whole thing together, and kind of put my imprint on it with a lot more of the flexible reality stuff, a bit more of a dark
this was
point
like
of view.
Season 5
and 6, yes. Okay. Season 5 and 6.
And what's The Simpsons?
I'll have to show you that. I'm not even sure.
By the way,
what is this?
Who's been at The Simpsons the longest?
That's it's a complicated question because people have come and gone.
Oh, I see.
So it's
I still see their name, but they might have rotated out.
They rotated out. Like Al Jean Al Jean and Mike Reese worked with me on It's Gary Shandling show.
Oh, cool.
And they went on The Simpsons from the very beginning, but then they rotated out about the time they were there for a little bit when I took over. I think for the first year, and it was so great to have them because we always have such a great time together, and they were very helpful because they had been there for a while. But then they went off to do The Critic, and they couldn't be doing The Simpsons at that point, so they came back, and Al came back, and then Al's been there, but Al had that time off in between. But technically, in a way, I would think of Al as being the guy.
When you go into a show like that, you describe like season 5, you go in. Are you ever pitching things? Is there a moment where they go, no, Bart would never do that, or Lisa would never do that?
No, it's an amazing thing. Again, Jim Brooks was my spiritual father and mentor, and I always wanted to work with him. And he was a fan of what I did on Newhart, and he asked me to do a guest spot on the Tracy Ullman show. So I went in. It was the first time I got to work with him. So excited. I wrote a sketch for the Tracy Ullman show with him. And we had this really great time, and it was like a dream to work with my, favorite guy finally. And then when they were putting The Simpsons together to spin that off, they asked me to join the show, but I was busy again on Get a Life and Larry Sanders and all that kind of stuff. And so when they asked me to take over the show, I had a feeling, that Jim, again, really respects the writer, and he gives you the freedom. But I was still excited to work with him. But it happened to be when I took over the show, he was so busy, I barely saw him or talked to him. And he, for whatever reason, which I still have no idea, and I'm incredibly grateful for, he gave me complete freedom on the show and completely backed anything that I wanted to do. I wrote this episode where Homer goes into space.
Yeah.
And that is an episode where a couple of the writers, very, very few, the writers who had really been there a long time and were the writers that understood flexible reality and understood science and stuff had no problem. But there were a couple of writers that really panicked at that idea.
Right.
And they said,
Homer would never make it
Was
through a
this
NASA program.
they thought it was jumping the shark kind of thing?
Yeah,
Or-
it was
okay.
too big.
Oh,
And
that's
I
interesting,
I was an electronics engineer. I worked for the FAA and the National Aeronautics and Federal Experimental Center, so I was very aware of space
That was
flight.
the funniest aeronautics center.
It was
You did a nice
hilarious.
job there, yeah.
Sometimes when those planes blew up, they blew up funny. People don't realize that. But anyway, so this was not a big thing. It was teachers had already gone up into space and everything. It was not a problem. But there are hand-wringing type comedy writers out there, and they kind of panicked a bit. And again, the genius of Jim Brooks, he came and he said, "This is fantastic. This is a great idea." He read the script and he loved it, and so that kept us going against some consternation. And then obviously it became like a really classic episode. So the people that complained about it are kind of
And probably
made
added
fun
years
of.
to the life of the show just by opening up the universe.
It sort of did. It sort of did. Like, the show had to grow. It had to grow in the way I wanted it to grow. And again, incredibly grateful, whether it was consciously or not, that Jim gave me just complete freedom the whole time. And then he was there a bit more in the 6th season, but he would just come and sit at the table reads. And then we'd get together for and this was like a dream to me because this is always what I wanted to do. I'd get in a room with him and he'd just pitch stuff. He wouldn't pitch changes. He would pitch things that would add and help with it. And it was genius Jim Brooks every time. And he would let me take what I wanted to take and not take what I wanted to take. It was just the easiest, most fun thing. And it was the same thing. As much as I loved running The Simpsons and I loved everybody there, I created the thing where I was able to keep some of the great Simpsons writers on, from the past by saying just come in a day a week like I was doing at Larry Sanders. And then when I rotated out of running the show full time, I did that for myself. I've been a guy there that's been there since that time, coming in a day or two a week, whatever the need is. And it's still great stimulation for me and, lovely people. And it's fun to see Jim. So, that's kind of the way we did that. But I realized I couldn't keep doing that, and I was getting offered films to direct, and that was sort of where my focus was, and that's how I rotated out of that.
I want to ask you about the films, but before I do they still even do a read-through on The Simpsons scripts?
Oh, yeah.
They do.
Yeah. We don't do as much as we used to do. It's a little bit streamlined in various ways. But yeah, we do the read on Thursday morning.
People ISDN their reads, or they literally come to the.
A lot of people are there. Some people are on the phone, and just a regular phone line, which is not great. And, sometimes when we have some of our amazing voice actors just on a regular phone line, you lose about 20 to 30% of the funny that way. And but we've gotten good ears for that, and we figure it out.
And how many rooms are on The Simpsons?
Two. There's two writing rooms. When I ran it, it was just one room,
right?
And we would just, plow through everything. But that was killing people. So for the longevity of the show and everything, I think it was Mike Scully that split it into two rooms.
And are they working on different scripts, or are they going, one room is story breaking and the other room is punching up?
It varies. It varies on the needs. Sometimes they're working on a completely different script in another room. And then in our room, we're working on a different script. And then sometimes we finish up a script, or before we even touch a script, we send it over there. Just let them do it.
And is over there like the kids' table?
It varies.
Let's put the dumb writers over there.
I mean, there's
they
the room.
might have something for us.
Yeah. They do a lot of great stuff. I mean, everybody there, contributes something.
Right.
I'm not saying they contribute anything good, but it's something.
But they keep their paycheck coming.
Yeah,
Bobby, what are you doing in our room? We know you're in the other room.
Actually, people, change rooms all the time. I mean, not everybody, but there's a lot of flow between the two rooms. Yeah.
It's knowing nothing about the sitcom process. I mean, except for sort of the broad strokes on it. I think this is interesting. So typically, would there just be one room, or the bigger the show?
The more successful a show gets and the bigger staff they can hire, the more apt they are to get a second room going.
I see. I heard, I had friends, I guess everybody knew somebody because she had so many writers on the Roseanne show.
Roseanne would have 3 rooms going on.
That's what I have to think that would pretty much be the...
Yeah, it was a very functional show.
Everybody says that.
Everybody says it. That's right.
They're bringing that back.
Yes. Yeah. Because of all the good vibes.
Right.
That's right. You can't keep
There's
something
nothing
like
mercenary about it, thankfully.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Well, finally some work for John Goodman and Laurie Metcalf.
Right.
How brilliant is John Goodman? Oh, my God.
Unbelievable.
Just one of the greatest actors we've ever seen.
Every movie, when he enters, I feel Fonzie applause. When he just walks in and I'm like, woo!
he actually knows how to walk. He has a great
carries.
He's so brilliant. Yeah.
You just want this Fonzie applause.
And he's another guy who has no idea how good he is. He just has no idea.
Yeah.
Does he really not?
And movies like Flight, like where you're just like, oh my, that guy's here. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, if a guy like that comes in and he still wants to please people, that's dangerous.
He's he kills me.
He did he started the prequel to
Cloverfield?
Yes, thank you.
That's right.
And that was
Cloverfield 10.
Wasn't that the same character he played on Roseanne?
Or 10 Cloverfield Lane?
I thought it was just a day that Roseanne was away or something.
No, it was.
Okay.
It felt a little. It was a little like before they got married.
It was so dark.
Yeah, it was.
It was so dark. It's a good movie.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, real fun.
Anyway, yeah, there are no laughs in it per se.
I don't know.
It depends how psychotic you are watching it.
You can take the per se out. There are no laughs in it.
It really is. I'm still. Taxi Driver is one of the funniest movies I've ever seen. And I when I was in the audience watching it, I was like alone laughing, and everybody was. But it is very funny. There are many jokes in Taxi Driver, even in the bloody scene at the end. The amount of times that guy gets shot.
Spoiler.
In the hand, he gets stabbed in the hand and shot in the hand. It's like a comedy routine. What happens?
I see.
Yeah. It's
I gotta look at it with that.
You got to look at it like that. Scorsese and that sense of humor really blossoms in obviously in the Ray Liotta movie Goodfellas. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That movie is as good as many comedies. It has as many laughs more laughs than many comedies.
I think Scorsese likes comics too. He likes to have them around.
He's very into comedy, and that's why he did The King of Comedy. He is a fan.
So what's interesting to me about you going into the feature stuff is that it wouldn't seem you could explore the alternate reality stuff as much in features.
It's an odd thing that I was looking, and I love women in comedy, and I was looking to do something with strong women.
Oh yeah.
And I had lots of fun with women in comedy throughout my career, and just amazing, lovely, wonderfully crazy in just the right way. People.
Hey now.
Yeah, exactly. You know what I'm saying.
I was going to be your backup singer for this portion.
Testify.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you did.
And so this script that had been lying around for like 5 years came to me. And it had, in addition to really interesting, strong female characters who were aggressive idiots, but they were strong. And all the plot points, what I was interested in doing in the rewrites and everything, all pushed by women and controlled by women. It was a universe controlled by women. And it happened to have this incredibly weird and still to this day, very, very strange structure of a giant dream sequence. Mm. And that gave me the opportunity to do all the flexible reality, weird, twisted stuff that I wanted. It was a very normal dream sequence in the original script, and I just totally got to turn it into this and kind of rewrite that whole feel of it. So it had everything that I wanted to be doing, and plus the enormous fun of working with all the great actors.
Isn't the world of TV better just for how quickly things get done relative to features, or
much? Right now, television is in a golden age, and features are very, very toilet-esque.
Right. No, because they become formulaic almost.
Because they're so expensive, and because big corporations bought up all the studios, which is a very bad thing. They only wake up when they start to make like a $200 million profit. They own that. That's the only thing that even starts to open their eyes. So that puts you into a box of superhero movies and properties that already exist and are already successful. And that's an incredibly limited thing. And then because you're looking for the 200, 300 million profit, you're also thinking globally. And once you think globally, you can't be as subtle in your storytelling because it's much easier to communicate across every country a punch in the face than it is a subtle dig or some sort of, even though we all do respond to the same things. One of the great things that Python showed is they showed the Holy Grail in Japan and how it was dubbed, and then they turned it back into English, and you saw that virtually every joke was destroyed and the meaning of every joke was destroyed. So comedy, it's harder to change languages and do that kind of thing, and it just lowers. So it killed the mid-price comedies, which I was designed to do.
Sure, those are the best. That's what Albert Brooks used to do.
That's what Albert Brooks used to do. So now you get offered and I'll get offers to do like, a $2 million comedy or a $1 million comedy, and you're at a point where you know how hard that is to do. and it starts to become, I don't know how much this is going to be worth it to go through this thing that we're all, on a mountainside with no heat and no real safety and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, if the thing is right, I'll do it. But certainly what used to be, it's a much harder thing to come across now for everybody.
I want to ask you about some lifestyle stuff. Anybody else have any show business stuff before I move on?
I don't know. I'm curious what you mean by lifestyle stuff.
Well, no. I'm curious about you're not. When I start, you'll realize it because I ask everybody who's like a success who's come through this room. So I always...
You haven't asked me, Mark.
You didn't ask me either. Whatever it is, I know I wasn't asked. I can already tell.
I'm just curious. You're doing so well. You're a guy who really excelled so quickly. You're a super young guy. You are on the hottest shows on television, the funniest shows on television. Your dreams, in a way, are being realized. Not in a way. I mean, really, your professional dreams were being realized. I'm just curious what your life was like at that time. As that continued. I mean, that was really quite a long run that you continue to have.
It was endless pussy.
Finally a truth teller.
What do you want? Do you go, oh, yeah, but I don't know. I mean, like, who are you hanging with? Are you and all the other comics?
I will tell you, first of all, I was very blessed because of Gary Shandling, my other dear friend, because we would go out every Friday after Larry Sanders and fail at picking up women, as I said.
It's insane.
It's amazing.
It was absolutely amazing. And one night we went to a party at Carrie Fisher's house. It wasn't even a party; it was sort of a political thing. And that started my relationship with Carrie Fisher, who became one of my dearest, closest friends. I haven't heard from her recently, but
I hear she can be standoffish.
She can be. But yeah, it was. She was actually flying back so that we always spend Christmas together. And,
oh my God!
Yeah, so it's sort of. I always say, "Why me?" Anyway,
you're the victim.
Yeah, I'm clearly
good for you.
Yeah. No, Carrie would love all these jokes. By the way,
clearly that's
much
true.
Darker than anybody can ever imagine, and just one of the most brilliant minds and one of the sweetest spirits in the world. And again, I have Gary to thank for that particular relationship starting that night, and it started really strong. And she was my date to Romy and Michelle's premiere, actually.
Oh,
that's so cool.
It was so sweet. But I will say, and through Carrie, I mean, Gary to Carrie, and people names that rhyme and then they die pretty close together.
Yeah.
How's Barry?
Yeah, Barry's amazing.
Not doing good. All right.
I would be worried now.
I'm so sorry.
That I got to meet, and through The Simpsons too, I got to meet everybody. I mean, all the way. Paul McCartney's probably an absolute peak. James Taylor is a dear friend of mine, and somebody I absolutely worshipped. And the Beatles taught me how to write. James Taylor taught me how to write. Jim Brooks taught me how to write. Woody Allen, Python, Eric Idle is a dear friend of mine. He lives around the corner. Yeah. We play guitars together all the time. So it is this, but you don't. Especially when one of the reasons that you're funny is that you're depressed and you can't enjoy anything. So
that's what I'm getting
finally
at.
Something I can relate to.
That's right. So,
oh my God.
But the great news is I get to meet people, at the very top, and billionaires and the most successful movie stars in the world, and you get to talk to them, and everyone is the same. So everybody has to relax. All the happiness comes internally. It comes in your decision and how you process your reality. You can turn. I've seen people turn the most amazing deals in the world into a negative thing, and then I've seen people turn things that are not that positive into an amazingly positive thing. It's from inside, and it relaxes you. And it's always been my interest. I'm a Beatle freak, I can name all 4 Beatles, and I studied them because no one has had more success in show business than the Beatles. And by studying them, and I literally have a Beatles library. I probably have over 100 Beatle books that I've read of the details. And you see that even getting everything isn't everything. And I think James Taylor says only everything is everything, and nobody gets that. And
Ringo was a good drummer. I'm asking you.
Ringo is a good drummer, and anyone who does not think Ringo is a good drummer is not a musician and has no idea about music.
So that's bullshit about when Ringo left, then Paul laid down the drums.
The sad thing is Paul is a terrific drummer too.
Okay,
Paul is like an alien. He can play anything.
So both things can be true.
Both things is totally true, and each drummer plays differently. Ringo is like a jazz artist. What he would do is what no one else else would do it. He plays with the wrong hand. He plays a left-handed type instead of a right hand. And his choices and stuff, they're pure Ringo. No one else would ever come up with them. And the way to know this is you talk to the great drummers like Steve Gadd, who I know fairly well. Just worships Ringo. Stuart Copeland, the drummer for the Beatles, worships Ringo.
Police, yeah.
Dave Grohl worships Ringo. They will go on and on for hours about the genius that he is and the fact that they wouldn't exist without him. So anyone that ever that's bullshit. They don't understand what drumming is. They don't understand what I always say. You need to talk to a musician. In fact, you can talk to a lot of people come up to me because I wind up traveling around with the various musicians and doing Philharmonic gigs with full, the Philharmonic in Boston or Phoenix.
What do you mean you do them?
Well, I'm with the artist. I'm hanging on like a loser Hollywood idiot.
No, that's awesome.
Yeah, no,
you're a roadie.
I'm a roadie. I happily a roadie because I'm such a music fan. So, and the percussionists from these amazing will come up and say, Ringo's the greatest person I've ever had, and I'm a percussionist, for classical music because of Ringo. Yeah. So I always say, talk to actual, real, professional, genius musicians before you make a.
And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, sir, please.
And what you were talking about, which made me think of McCartney, you were talking about how people are never secure or, are never like, I made it. McCartney, still at 75, is changing around the Lennon and McCartney credit because he's insecure about how his name will come up on a web search. So if you're not secure in your legacy as Paul McCartney, what friggin' chance do any of us have?
And that's a very good point because I got to spend a lot of time with Paul when he did the Simpsons. I flew to Sussex and his studio in Hogs Mill in Sussex there, which is where the Beatles were reuniting at that exact moment to do the thing.
Free as a bird.
Free as a bird. And I got to hear that. He happened to put let's put up the mix for Dave, And,
my God.
So I heard the first new Beatles song in 25 years with him 3 feet in front of me, and he was, conducting it. He goes, that's Joel's on guitar, best guitar he's played in 10 years, that kind of a thing. And it was just amazing.
Awesome.
It's awesome. And that's the genius of Paul's because just like you're saying, he's never finished. He's always trying to do something more. He doesn't feel it's completed. One of the things he really appreciated in our conversations was the understanding that money doesn't solve problems. Success does not solve problems. It solves those problems of money and success. And that's it. It's these narrow things. It doesn't solve the other things. And I said, in meeting all these top people in the world, they're very insecure. They're very worried. If they, the truth is, if I don't want to do names, but if you run, Mike was actually pretty happy, but it's like when I met Mike Nichols, I wanted to be a director probably because of The Graduate. That was the movie. And I got to meet Mike and he was a huge fan of Romeo and Michelle. And I said, all that came from you because of The Graduate. And he said, it's one big circle. It's one big circle. And then he sued me. But, but that's just what you do.
That's why it's now called Romeo and Michelle and Mike?
That's right.
Yeah. I always wondered what was behind that.
Weird.
But, and Bob Dylan has said the same thing. If somebody comes up to you and gives you a compliment on something you did 40 years ago, you really don't feel that you even did it. And it's, what did you do today? Oh. And I've seen like big actors like fighting to get their quotes. Because the studio will come and insult them and say, oh, you might have gotten this, but you're not going to get that now. It never ends. You have to find your happiness. You have to find your security within yourself. It's not going to come from the outside. And, that's the one lesson. And talking about that with Paul, who, as I consider the pinnacle, he totally understood that. And he would not lend me $1 million.
But was it Dana Carvey does that line? I'd like to follow Paul McCartney around and just see if $1 million falls out of his pants pocket. Yeah. So you can understand even how he would battle for the proper order of the names.
Yeah, I know it bothers him. I know that I don't know how hard he's trying anymore. He went through a period.
He got it on the new Sgt. Pepper.
They say that. He said that, and I have every version.
Really, and it's not?
I can't find it.
Oh, okay.
And I read exactly what you're talking about, and I pulled out the album because a lot of those credits were wrong. They were sort of saying that Paul now has like a single credit on Mr. Kite, and that's the opposite of what that song is. It's more of a John song.
Right.
But one of the reasons that Paul was annoyed is not just really the way it reads there, but it's on fake books. You guys know what a fake book is?
No, I don't. What is it?
A fake book is what like a guitarist or pianist uses. It just has a piece of the music. It's a big.
It's just
thick book.
charts, basically. There's
Okay.
not. It's
But
like
just
the
part
melody
of the
line,
song,
the
yeah.
melody line, and the chords.
So that when you're in a bar or you're sitting in a thing and people have a request, you have almost everything in front of you, every song ever. So on those things, they do them so sloppy that they cut off the second part of the writer. So a lot of all the Beatles songs actually just say written by John Lennon. Period.
Oh wow!
So
that would bother me. That would bother me.
It's funny what bothers people. It's amazing, and I've had that same thing. Oh, that piece of information has got out, and it's a lie, and it's wrong. There was some stuff that came out about Romeo and Michelle from 20 years ago that was wrong and incorrect, and I knew that nobody cared about it except me.
Right.
Sure.
And you just have to try and get out of your head that way, and it's a 24/7 struggle for your entire life.
You were invited. You were invited and are invited on this incredible cruise.
That's right.
During which this billionaire guy buys up all these boats and their ships, and you cruise up to Alaska. It's all just you guys, like 200 people. You're on the cruise. Yeah, I think you were literally on the cruise ship that I was on to Alaska, but there were only 200 of you. There were 1,000 of us.
That's right. That's right. It's a guy named Paul Allen who, if you've ever cursed at Windows, that you're cursing at Paul. That's him and Bill Gates are relatively wealthy people, and he would throw
Relative to everything.
relative
each
to
other.
everything. That's right.
Relative to the culture we know.
And Paul is actually, I'm incredibly impressed because he really knew how to use his money to celebrate and have an interesting, creative thing. And he would do these trips every year that would go someplace interesting. There was a Venice one, there was a St. Petersburg one, and there was an Alaska one. And what it was is, everybody flew, he would fly everybody to Alaska, and then you got on this cruise ship, the Crystal Harmony in this case. And it was a great combination of Hollywood writer and director, creative types, and then the top people in the computer industry. So it was. I met the guy who invented the laptop, and these genius people were very creative and very smart. And then we're together on the boat and encouraged to have sex. And
Let's make smart babies, everybody.
It was nerd royalty.
it was nerd royalty, and it was Coppola and Lucas, and it was just all my big heroes there. It was incredible, and then Bill Gates and Paul.
When you're
And Bill's
Any
going,
women.
Bill's going, this is so much cooler than that charity bullshit I do.
It's true. It's true. And he bought out the Crystal Harmony, which would normally have like 1,200 people. It was just 200 of us.
I literally was on that same cruise, except I
On the
was not
schmo version.
There was not exactly. I was on the average Joe version.
And he bought out the all of Glacier Bay, so all the other ships we weren't on them. Just
He
so we
hired the
wouldn't-
SEALs. He hired.
yeah. Well, he hired a whale. He hired a whale.
that we could watch.
No, so
Well,
you're
what
saying
happened
We
is-
don't want to not see a whale,
The
so we've
whale
got
was
to buy some whales, some whale trainers.
The whale was trained to, and then
They're
you could
wranglers, yeah.
ride on the whales.
Yeah.
And he blew out champagne, which was pretty cool
was
too.
that seems a little off brand.
We bought
but
some
all right.
trained whales.
But you're
Little off
It was one of the
brand.
most. I mean, I have to say that harpooning that whale was one of the greatest
Oh my God,
experiences
that's
of my life.
so
it was
great.
amazing. So few people get to do that
That's
in the
true.
21st
That's
century.
true.
Yeah,
That is,
no, good for you.
And it was
So
the
Eric Trump was on
To
the
do the
cruise.
last one like
so
that is so
delicious.
cool too.
You've
The last
never-
one like that.
Oh my!
Because the last one puts up a fight.
It does.
He's like, I'm the last whale. Oh, well.
And that was, even though
He
that
was a
was
little
that
tough, a little
many,
tough,
many
but-
years ago, I still have some of that whale meat in the freezer.
Oh my God.
That's
It holds up great.
That's really sweet.
You're humble.
And when you're on that boat, on that trip,
The floating TED Talk.
yeah, when you're on that floating TED Talk, do you when you have George Lucas and all these people that you've mentioned around you, the guy who created the laptop, George Lucas, etc., is there any sense of trepidation you have about going on? Are you like one of those? Hi, Dave Mirkin.
I'm very shy. I am really a shy person. I in a group of people, it's always they have to come to me generally, and maybe I even seem unfriendly, but I am. I'm quiet.
You do.
The whole thing when I went to Carrie's house, and I basically went on the Paul Allen trip because of Carrie Fisher, who was very much the theoretical center of show business. In many ways, and obviously other things. But I barely said anything to her that night because I was a huge fan of her. I knew how smart she was. I had thought in my lonely times of seeing her on the Tonight Show of calling her up because I felt a connection with her and maybe asking her out or just having a conversation. But I never had the guts to do it. But before I was leaving that party, she looked at me and she said, "Will you be my boyfriend?" And I said, "Okay, we'll stay together forever." And it was only because she said that we had this relationship.
Wow.
So that's generally the way I am. So if the other person is open and ready to talk, I'm there, but I'm not aggressive with other people. I mean, if it's somebody that I see that I'm a giant fan of, I'll go over and say I'm just a huge fan and, get in that way because I want to give them the love and let them know how much they meant to me in my life and how much they helped me. It's important for me to get that out and to thank them, but then to not bother them beyond that if they don't. And I am often wrestled to the ground by security.
Yeah, I realize, you don't want to be that guy. But on the other hand, I've realized really too late in life, I think, in a sense, because I remember I cross-pollinated just by accident with a couple of people who I just looked up to and I thought, great thing, but I didn't want to be that guy. And so I never even paid them the compliment. I later thought, well, you should have. I mean, there's just no...
They'll generally appreciate it.
Sure.
I mean, especially if they know you're in the business too.
I was about to say they appreciate it more if you're a director of features.
Yeah, I would have said I was a director. I mean, I would have.
You should. Yeah, it's great to lie to them.
Yeah,
you definitely want to play up your credits so they feel like they met someone important.
So the super cruises that Paul Allen does. You were on the one. Did you go on other ones as well?
It never worked out that I went on another one because of what I did on the first one.
Is it true that he's able to hire Isaac, Gopher, Julie, and Captain Stubing? Is it true that he has that kind of money?
That's a great bit.
He has that kind
That
of
is
money.
unbelievable. He gets Senator Fred Grandy to put on the purser outfit.
Amazing. It was amazing.
Who plays Dot?
Oh my God, that's just wild.
That is
last story
incredible.
about that. I don't mean to.
Now I
I'm
wanna
fascinated by it. Did they have like any kind of guest lectures or any kind of like events that were designed to bring you together or not?
It was actually a very challenging 4 days because it was a nonstop thing. The excursions in Alaska, and that's what you would do. You would go on canoes, or you would go on rafting, or you would go get in a helicopter and take an excursion on that. As I said,
I choose helicopter.
That one had the longest line. Hey, we're nerds.
You had, you would do different things through the day. And then at night, and you're talking about bringing people in, he would fly in like Little Feat or a band or something. Wow. And they would be playing. And then there was a lot of musicians there. And they would get up, famous musicians would get up and they would start jamming. And the jam would go to 6 a.m. and the first excursion would start at 7 a.m. So part of it was the idea that you had to kind of live. If you wanted to see everything and you never wanted to go to sleep because there was always something amazing happening, you basically lived on like 1 hour.
And that's where the blow came in.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank God the guy who invented Red Bull was there.
That was sort of the feeling. And so it was that kind of intensity. But it was mainly you just got to know each other as you went on these various excursions. Like I went canoe. It was an odd thing because I was canoeing with Dawn French and Robin Williams. We were just on.
Oh wow!
It was as hilarious as the wilderness ever gets.
Dawn French is great.
She is.
I went to a Jules Holland concert in their box with her when she was with Lenny Henry still. When we went to the concert for George.
Wow.
George. Yeah, she was absolutely lovely. I mean, everybody. Everyone was incredibly. It's amazing that if you, just cover people in luxury, they generally get in a good mood.
Yeah, it's weird about that.
Yeah, it's weird.
Well, listen, everybody was pretty nice on my cruise too, okay, Dave? I'm just saying.
They made him vegan things.
They did. They made me vegan meals. Which
There
is
you go.
nice.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Vegan all the way.
So there's that.
Yeah.
Look, this has been such a great ride. Even as we get into this last thing, I think I could have spent an hour just asking you about the cruise. You've done so much stuff. It's very, very cool to have you in here, and so we really appreciate it.
Well, I feel I'm so fortunate, because I'm the same way. I don't feel as successful at all, and I just feel grateful for everything that I got to do. It's just been way beyond any of my hopes.
Are you on social media at all, or not really?
I'm on at Dave Mirkin, Mirkin, Twitter. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. If anybody wants to reach Dave, you can do it that way, at Dave Mirkin. You're I am Laura House. Literally, I am.
An I and an M.
Yeah.
I'm Laura House.
Right. I'm Laura House.
I'm Laura.
You're at
J.Elvis Weinstein.
J.Elvis Weinstein. Dave Mirkin, thank you again. Great ride. Appreciate it.
Thank you all so much.
Thanks for all the comedy.
Always good fun.
A lot of fun.
I want to thank you for all the ways that you support my friends on the Edge podcast. And if you haven't already, why don't you show your support and subscribe? What's the matter with you? Go to Edge Show. Oh, it's Edge Dash. What's with the dash? Stupid. I want to thank you for all the ways that you support my friends on the Edge podcast. Show your support and leave something on their website, edge-show.com. Stupid. Why is there a dash?
edge-show.com.